I love cycling on rural roads. Close to where I live, there is a town called Cedarburg, which I particularly like. One Saturday, my wife was at work and I had nothing to do, so I strapped my bike to the car and drove to Cedarburg for an hour. We parked in the scenic town center and rode out of town and into the surrounding countryside. The houses, businesses, and cars became fewer and fewer as we followed secluded back roads. Eventually, there were only 1 or 2 houses every half-mile. Unpaved gravel roads were lined with cornfields and small forests. As I drove down one such back road, a van passed me. Shortly after passing, the van turned and pulled up next to me. I looked over and saw a woman in her mid to late 20s in the passenger seat. A woman in her early 20s rolled down her window and looked at me. The driver, a white male in his 20s with a few inches of beard and wearing a baseball cap, leaned over to her and with a broad smile on his face, in his distinctive southern, slightly slurred voice, said to me, "Hey, do you know Ryan Shelton?" I thought for a moment, but I had never heard of Ryan Shelton. I said I didn't know, apologized, and pressed the pedal. The van stopped for a while, made a U-turn, and drove off in the direction it was originally going. I thought nothing of this encounter. Maybe the driver was a friend of Ryan Shelton's and thought we met through a mutual friend or something. I don't know. I didn't think I had anything to worry about at that moment. I just kept driving aimlessly, turning this way and that. I had no purpose. I just wanted to enjoy the summer day and wander the lazy countryside. About 10 minutes later, on a completely new road going in a completely different direction from where I had first met the van, I saw the same van again. We were heading towards each other. I smiled and nodded as we passed the driver, and I remember thinking it was a strange coincidence to meet that van again. The driver smiled just as broadly as he passed us. Maybe they were lost and looking for Ryan Shelton, or maybe they were enjoying the scenic drive and recognized me as his friend. I don't know, but I began to think more critically about the situation. As I drove down the winding road, I encountered the van again. They were driving towards me again, and I approached them. The driver rolled down his window and leaned out. I turned off the engine, looked at him, and waited for him to say something. 30 seconds doesn't seem like a long time, but try stopping a stranger and looking at him for 30 seconds. In this case, 30 seconds equals a lifetime. Finally, he asked me if I knew Ryan Shelton. A similar question made the smile disappear from his face. He looked at me, and I thought he was joking. Did he really not remember being asked the same question 20 minutes earlier? Was he joking, or was he on drugs? After a while, I told him that I still didn't know anyone named Ryan Shelton, and pedaled back to the road. That's when I realized how far away I was. I looked at the road I was on now and saw cornfields on one side, forest on the other, and no human settlements along the road. Looking over my shoulder, I could see a van slowly driving down the road away from me. It is no coincidence that I have met this van 3 times. I turned onto a random road going in the other direction. I don't understand how people drive through the same mazes. Maybe I was just driving, but why did he stop me and ask me the same question twice? It was pretty weird, and I was starting to get a little worried. I decided to head back downtown. I pedaled as hard as I could, the gravel road ahead of me turning right and the dirt road turning left. As I came to the fork, the same van appeared from around the corner. I grabbed my Leatherman penknife, which I always carry on these trips, just in case. As the van approached, I thought about jumping out and running into the cornfield. The van slowed down as it approached me. The driver rolled down his window and leaned out again. I sped up, knowing that if the van chased me, I would never catch up. I looked over my shoulder to the middle of the road and saw the van. I took the right fork and continued along the gravel road until I could no longer see the van beyond the corn rows. I got off my bike and crawled forward until I came to the edge of a cornfield. The van was in the distance, moving away from me. I ran back to my bike, and as soon as the van was completely out of sight, I turned around and took the left fork along the dirt road. I knew that if the people in the van had something bad in mind, and they caught me on this dirt road, between the cornfields and away from where people could meet each other, then they would move towards me. My trick worked, and I made it to the city center without seeing them again. When I got home that day, I was still replaying the incident in my head, and the name Ryan Shelton kept coming back to me. Was Ryan Shelton famous? I wondered. Musicians and stuff. I must have known Ryan Shelton. I Googled the name and got some horrible results. A newspaper article from Rockford, Illinois. The article revealed that a man named Ryan Shelton turned himself in to police after assaulting another man at a gas station in 2015. The article included a photo of the suspect, Ryan Shelton, who was clearly the same man as the van driver, wearing a baseball cap and sporting a several-inch beard. A check of inmates in Winnebago County did not turn up Ryan Shelton. Ryan Shelton somehow got out of prison, or maybe he wasn't convicted because I couldn't find any articles about his sentencing. 4 years ago, I trained a newcomer. He was in his early 30s, looked fit, did yoga, and had a beautiful girlfriend. He looked very balanced and healthy. His name was Andrew. I had another colleague who had worked with him for many years. He was popular with the management, but to be honest, he was a pain in the ass. People could only accept him in small doses. He was basically the embodiment of a TikTok frat boy, freestyling and dancing randomly at work. He was extremely annoying. Anyway, his name was Brad. Now, before I explain, I should add that this workplace is terrible. Barely a star on Indeed. It's a big factory with no windows. Toxic management. Long working hours. It was a very hard place to work for most people's mental health. Anyway, a year after Andrew got the job, things started to change. He and I became friends. We had long, civilized conversations about interesting things, but when he talked about his new belief that the Earth was flat and his holographic theory of the moon, something about what he said was off. It wasn't the same as before. It actually made sense. I decided it was probably a compatibility issue, or he was just trolling. For the next couple weeks, Andrew seemed interested in my co-worker Brad and started imitating him. It seemed harmless, but as time went on, he danced more and more. He also began to behave in the morning meetings with the same mannerisms and expressions as Brad. This scared Brad, and he changed shifts. We thought he was using drugs, but Andrew was against all drugs, including alcohol and marijuana. He was also a vegetarian. Things got even worse when Brad started dating a new female co-worker at work. She eventually became his girlfriend. They started living together and so on. Meanwhile, Andrew goes to work using Brad's name, signs the register as Brad, and calls himself Brad in the morning. At the end of the day, Andrew stands up at his desk and exclaims that he loves Brad's girlfriend. He crosses his arms and faces the ceiling. The entire audience falls silent. He then stood in the corner with a broom and did nothing to clean up for the next few hours. Even when I tapped him on the shoulder or called his name, he didn't turn from his corner. I didn't see him leave the corner until it was time to go home. He was the last one to leave. When I passed him in the hallway, I struggled to stay calm. I looked at him, and he was looking right at me, head down, making a fake dog face, eyebrows in a V, tongue and teeth out. The next day, our boss decided Andrew needed to go to the hospital, so we made an appointment and got him on the phone. He was given a week's vacation. According to a security guard I was close to, Andrew would come in the middle of the night and try to get into work using a card reader, between 2 and 3 a.m. Anyway, to my surprise, a week later Andrew came back, and he was somewhat normal and seemed to remember almost nothing. By the way, he wrote an album on his cell phone, which was surprisingly better than I thought it would be. As things got back to normal with Andrew, he wanted to go hiking with me, throw axes at trees and things like that. I was neither for nor against it, and I was a little angry inside, so I told him I would get back to him about it. Then he asked me if I was still depressed, and I told him that unfortunately I had other things to do. Then he said he couldn't throw an axe in your face, could he? I didn't know how to react, so I laughed and told the manager. He scratched his head awkwardly and shrugged. Anyway, Eventually, Andrew found Brad's address for a business meeting to which everyone was invited, and someone leaked it to Andrew. They ended up finding a rock, a stick, and what looked like a strangely shaped temple on their doorstep. Things got really weird when Andrew was discovered for looking out the window at night. He would also scratch the window with his fingernail, call Brad's name, and whisper it over and over. It was at this point that the principal decided to fire Andrew. 4 years later, Andrew had to file a restraining order against Brad's former friend for stalking him. Every year, he creates a new Facebook account and adds over 200 employees who used to work there. Each time, he uses a new name and changes the selfies. He also sends each of us a message saying, "Hi, this is Brad from work. My question is this: what do you call this kind of behavior? And how did such a normal, sympathetic, and calm person get into such a mess? Is there a word to describe this behavior? What would you diagnose?" One of my friends had the courage to ask him if he remembered anything. He doesn't seem to remember anything, but he definitely remembers Brad's ex-girlfriend and says some very disturbing things about her being the one and only. "I'm the big one. She's the little one. She says she came into this world to save it. She doesn't seem to be supported by her family at all. She has a new job, and she lives alone, unsupervised. That seems to be some kind of risk. What happened to him and how he is now, I do not know."